My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 31 years old. And last Thursday, I got a call from a hospital in San Antonio. The woman on the line spoke in that careful tone nurses use when they're trying to manage your heart rate before dropping a bomb. Dr. Harper, you're listed as the emergency consultant for a patient in critical cardiac failure, Luke Harper. The name made the air thicken around me. Then she added, there's a note on the file. It says, do not contact Evelyn Harper. That's when my fingers went cold. Luke Harper is my brother, and I am officially the only blood relative qualified to save his life. But apparently, someone made sure I wouldn't know until it was almost too late. So let me ask you something. What do you do when the family that erased you from their lives ends up needing the very person they tried to bury? Have you ever been hurt so deeply, so deliberately, by the people who should have protected you? That coming back isn't even about closure anymore, but proof. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who I was before they made me question it. If you've ever felt invisible at your own dinner table, if you've ever had your voice stolen by someone with the same last name, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, because this story isn't fiction. This is exactly how I found out that my name meant nothing to my family until it meant everything to a hospital trying to keep my brother alive. And to understand how we got here, you have to start where it all began, where I learned how to vanish while sitting 2 feet away from the people who said they loved me. We grew up in the northern suburbs of Minneapolis. Nice yard, white picket fence, the kind of house that looked like it should smell like cinnamon cookies and childhood laughter. From the outside it did, but inside it was all about Luke. Every dinner without fail started with the same question. How many points did Luke score today? It didn't matter if he played basketball, football, or slipped on gravel, chasing a soccer ball. If Luke sweated, it was headline news at our table. My father, Russell Harper, a retired cop with a polished badge still hanging by the mantel, would lean forward, elbows planted like an audience waiting for applause. My mother, Barbara, played her role like a seasoned stagehand, refilling Luke's plate, adjusting his posture, laughing at even his half-jokes like they were premium stand-up material. And then there was me. I learned early on how to push mashed potatoes around just fast enough to look busy. I perfected the art of listening without interrupting, waiting to be noticed without making it obvious I was trying. Once I got a perfect score in biology. The principal announced it over the loudspeaker. That night at dinner, no one said a word. Luke had scored 2 goals in gym class. That earned him an extra scoop of cobbler. I wanted to be a doctor. I never said it out loud, not at first. But my notebooks were filled with diagrams of the human body, hand-drawn with precision. My margins were full of calculations and little notes. What causes ventricular fibrillation? Or look up Salk's polio trials. But none of it mattered. One day I finally said something. I got into the summer research program at Johns Hopkins. I was 16. My dad didn't look up from buttering his bread, just grunted. Luke leaned back and smirked. That for nerds or something? Mom put down her water glass. Evelyn, don't make it a thing. Your brother's under a lot of pressure already. Don't make him feel like he's falling behind. Falling behind, I was running an entirely different race, alone. That night I wrote in my notebook, it's not fear keeping me quiet anymore. It's practice. In our living room, Luke's trophies glowed under the recessed ceiling lights. Our parents arranged them like a museum installation. I once asked Mom why my National Science Award wasn't on display. She laughed while drying dishes. Sweetheart, we don't need to brag about schoolwork. When you do something big, I'll be the first to hang it. I remember holding the envelope from Johns Hopkins' full academic scholarship in my hands, sitting on my bedroom floor like it was radioactive. I didn't dare tell them. I just left the letter on the kitchen counter near the fruit bowl. Maybe someone would see it. Maybe they'd say something. That night my mother knocked. Not to hug me, not to celebrate. She closed the door softly, sat on the edge of my bed like a judge about to sentence the guilty. I saw your letter, she said. I held my breath. I'm happy for you, but don't mention it around Luke. He just failed his athletic recruitment eval. He's feeling fragile. Let's not make him feel worse. I blinked, but I got into Johns Hopkins. Yes, she nodded. And that's great, but family comes first. We don't hurt each other with comparison. That was the night I realized my achievements weren't just invisible. They were a threat. I started shrinking after that. Not physically, just inward. I learned to fold my joy down into manageable pieces, to smile when I wanted to scream, to nod when I should have run. Every win I earned lived in a box under my bed, academic awards letters of recommendation, a photo from the youth science fair where I took first place. It was my private archive, my little rebellion. I didn't play sports. I wasn't charming. I wasn't loud or easygoing or magnetic like Luke. I just tried, hard, all the time. And for my family, that made me too much, too serious, too distant, too inconvenient. I was 17 when I made a promise to myself. One day, I would build a life so full, so grounded, that no one could deny I was here, even if they never saw me at all. And I did, but not the way I imagined. What came next wasn't some dramatic act of rebellion. No slammed doors, no final speech. It was just a dinner, one dinner that changed everything. It started with a phone call from my mother. Her voice was soft, almost friendly. "Just a casual dinner," she said. "We'd love to see you. Nothing big." It had been nearly a year since I'd heard her voice without tension wrapped around every syllable. I was in my second year of college, then juggling 2 backpacks, a half scholarship, and a rotation of ER night shifts that made sleep feel like a myth. Most nights, I'd eat instant noodles at 2 a.m. while studying next to a broken vending machine. A part of me knew better, but another part, the one that still wanted to be seen, whispered, "What if they've changed?" So I went home. It was snowing lightly when I landed, the kind of cold that crawls up your sleeves and settles in your bones. No one came to pick me up. I dragged my suitcase across an icy sidewalk and took 2 buses back to the house I used to call home. Nothing had changed, not the carpet, not the clock, not the way time seemed to freeze inside those walls. My dad was polishing the same old wall clock like it was a family heirloom. My mother was in the kitchen wrapping presents. Luke was on the couch in sweatpants, gaming headset on barking orders at invisible teammates. No one looked up when I walked in. "You're home," Mom said flatly, like I'd been gone for hours, not months. Then she glanced at the time. "Dinner's at 6. Get dressed properly." Her words landed like snow on dry asphalt, cold quiet, and impossible to clean up. The dining room was set like it was Christmas Eve. Linen tablecloth, silver cutlery, scented candles flickering next to the china plates they only used for special occasions. The roast in the oven smelled like something pulled from a holiday magazine ad. I sat down last. My chair felt harder than I remembered, like even the furniture had stiffened in my absence. Dad took the lead as always, saying grace without emotion, more habit than prayer. Then the conversation started, or rather, the monologue. Luke had been accepted into a special police training program. My mother had developed a custom nutrition plan to help his stamina. My father was calling in favors from old precinct buddies to get him placed in the department early. No one asked about my classes. No one asked about the ER shift that ended with me collapsed in a restroom stall after 20 straight hours on my feet. No one asked anything. I chewed quietly. My fingers tingled from the heat of the glass I held, but I welcomed the burn. It was the only thing I could feel that reminded me I was still here. Then came dessert. My mother placed a slice of pumpkin pie in front of me carefully, almost ceremoniously. "Evelyn," she said, "your father and I wanted to talk to you about something." That's when I saw it. An envelope. Neatly folded, pulled from Dad's coat pocket, like a document he'd rehearsed handing over. He slid it across the table toward me. "Read this first," he said. I opened it, fingers trembling not from cold this time, but from something deeper, older. It was an application packet. A 2-year program for nursing assistants at the local community college. Every field was filled out. All of it, my name, date of birth, address, prior academic history already written. Only the signature line was left blank. "What is this?" I asked, though my voice barely left my throat. Dad didn't blink. "It's a realistic path, stable hours, less stress than a full medical degree. Good benefits." Mom nodded like this was old news. "We know you're tired, honey. We see the circles under your eyes. We worry about you." Dad added, "If you sign it, we'll pay the tuition. You can move back in, save money, focus. No more pressure to prove anything." There was a pause, maybe 2 seconds, but it stretched like a chasm. I felt the chair vanish beneath me. Their offer wasn't out of care. It was out of control. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to shrink, to fold neatly into a version of myself that wouldn't make Luke uncomfortable. I stared at the form again, the font, the boxes, the fake handwriting pretending to give me a choice. And I asked slowly, purposefully, "And if I don't sign it?" My father didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket, pulled off his wedding ring, and set it on the table beside the pie plate. It hit the wood with a dull, heavy clink. "Then you leave this house too." No one raised their voice. No one cried. Just silence. That kind of silence you can feel pressing against your skin. The kind that makes the air heavier, like gravity, just doubled in the room. I stood up. Not fast, not angry, just steady. "All right," I said. My voice surprised even me, quiet but solid. "If that's the choice, then I've made mine." I went upstairs. The hallway light flickered once on my way up, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to witness what was happening. I pulled my old suitcase from under the bed. 2 sets of clothes, a thin jacket, a travel-sized toothbrush. Then I opened the drawer where I kept my old folder, the one labeled in black Sharpie Truth File. Inside, my Academic Excellence Award, my first published article, the essay that placed top 5 in the national science competition. A recommendation letter from a professor who once told me, "You belong in the operating room, Evelyn, not beside it." These were the only things that had ever made me feel like more than just a supporting character in someone else's script. As I dragged my suitcase downstairs, my mother stood on the landing. Her hand gripped the railing like it could keep her from saying what she really wanted to. "You're really choosing..." "Strangers over your own family?" I didn't answer, because that question didn't deserve an answer. I opened the front door. The air outside slapped my face. Freezing but freeing. I had no plan, nowhere to go. $80 in my wallet, and a heart that felt like a cracked windshield still intact, but splintered from too many hits. But for the first time, those dollars felt like freedom. What I didn't know then was that this wouldn't be the last time they tried to shrink me. They weren't done. They hadn't just tried to silence me. Soon they would try to erase me entirely. And that's when I stopped waiting for their permission and started keeping records. Because if they were going to rewrite my story, I was going to write it first. I found a room above a laundromat on the south side of Chicago. 3rd floor, no elevator. The window didn't close all the way, and in winter, the wind cut through the cracks like glass. My radiator hissed like it hated me, and the ceiling had a stain that looked suspiciously like Michigan. But it was mine. The rent was cheap. The walk to the hospital took 40 minutes. I made that walk twice a day, once for classes, once for the night shift. During the day, I memorized emergency protocol and studied case reports. At night, I made cappuccinos at a 24-hour cafe across from the ER, my hands constantly smelling like burnt milk and sanitizer. I kept a brown envelope under my pillow. Inside, rent receipts, scrub pay stubs, and every patient note or compliment card I'd ever received. One night, I added a sugar packet wrapper someone had scribbled on. It said, "Thanks for staying when no one else would." I wasn't collecting praise. I was collecting proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I was real. Because when your family tells you over and over again that you're not enough, you start to believe it. And when they try to erase you, you either let them or you start documenting everything. I called it my truth file. Every letter of recommendation, every transcript, every essay, scanned, saved, printed twice. I backed them up on a flash drive and a cloud folder I didn't name after myself, just in case someone went digging. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Because deep down, I knew my family wasn't done. During my 6th semester, I applied for a national scholarship, one designed for med students with disadvantaged or unstable family backgrounds. Only 2 recipients were chosen nationwide. I spent 3 weeks perfecting my essay. I wrote about treating undocumented patients at the Westbridge Clinic, how many were too afraid to explain where it hurt because they didn't want to be reported. I wrote about a Haitian grandmother who'd come in holding her granddaughter's hand, whispering, "No papers, but she's bleeding." And I wrote about the helplessness in my chest when I realized being a doctor wasn't always enough. I printed backup copies, sent the application certified mail, saved the tracking number. Then I waited. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing. No rejection letter, no confirmation, just silence. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe someone else was more deserving. Maybe my story didn't stand out. Maybe I was forgettable after all. I pushed it down, kept going. But something felt off. 3 years later, I was presenting a research paper at a medical conference in Denver, nervous, tired, and fueled by vending machine coffee. After my panel, a woman approached me. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, warm voice. "Evelyn Harper," she said, reading my name tag. "Weren't you an applicant for the Mason Torres Equity Fellowship a few years back?" My heart stuttered. "Yes," I said carefully. She pulled out her phone, opened a portal. "Your name's marked withdrawn. Says we got a letter saying you were pursuing other opportunities." My pulse roared in my ears. "I never withdrew," I whispered. The woman frowned. "It came from Evelyn Harper. Homepad@gmail. Sounded polite. Said you were declining the offer and thanking the committee." That email address wasn't mine. But the words, the tone, the impersonation, they were familiar. Only one person had ever helped me format applications that early on. The same person who once offered to simplify my email logins. The one who convinced me she could handle the admin side of things while I focused on studying. My mother. That night, I pulled out the original printout of my scholarship submission from the bottom of my truth file. There it was, clear as day, recipient Barbara, harper7@aol.com, her old email. The one she used when she helped me apply to freshman aid programs. The one linked to my high school FAFSA. She never deleted it. She never told me. She just quietly rerouted my future. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I scanned everything, wrote a private affidavit, saved screenshots, backed it all up again. Then I wrote in my journal, "This is not for court. This is not for vengeance. This is so that one day, if I start to question whether it ever happened, I will have the evidence that says, yes, Evelyn, it did." That might have been the worst of it. But I was wrong, because the second betrayal came in the form of an email with the subject line, "Medical Visa Verification Urgent." It came from a Department of Homeland Security address. They were confirming whether I, Dr. Evelyn M. Harper, had sponsored a temporary visa for a foreign national named Camila Rosas. My name, medical license number, hospital ID, all listed. At first, I thought it was phishing. Then I saw the attachment, a scanned affidavit bearing my forged signature. It looked close. The slant was mine. The loop on the Y almost perfect. Almost. Camila Rosas. The name tickled something in the back of my memory. A girl Luke had dated during his year abroad. Brazilian American, pre-med dropout, quiet on the outside, cold underneath. I never met her, but I'd seen the name once on a forwarded email from my mom. It had been years ago. One of those family chains filled with photos of Luke hiking in Rio. My stomach turned. I checked the affidavit again. It was dated 3 months prior. Camila had been approved for specialist treatment under my professional care, which I never authorized. I looked closer. The PDF had metadata. It had been generated on a desktop labeled Home PCU/BH, Barbara Harper. I didn't call her. I didn't ask why. Instead, I opened my laptop and wrote a formal statement. To the DHS officer, I wrote, "I, Dr. Evelyn Harper, did not authorize this affidavit. The signature is forged. I have no relationship with the individual in question." Then I attached copies of my real signature, a copy of my license, a notarized letter confirming I had never treated, met, or approved any documentation for Camila Rosas. I added it to the truth file, and when I zipped up the folder that night, my hands shook, not from anger, but from exhaustion. Because betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through your own handwriting, but even then I wasn't ready for what came next. Because there's one thing worse than having your future stolen. It's watching someone wear your past like it was theirs all along. In Part 4. I'll tell you what happened when my brother Luke stood on a stage and recited my story word for word. He thought no one would notice. He forgot I kept receipts. 3 months after I submitted the forged visa affidavit to Homeland Security, I got an email from my old research advisor, Dr. Kaminsky. Subject line, "Thought you should know." At first, I assumed it was a form message, maybe an invite to some conference or alumni panel, but then I read the body. "Evelyn, I just finished reviewing this year's finalists for the National Community Health Collaboration Program. One of the essays that made it to the final round sounded familiar." My stomach dropped. I kept reading. Same theme, same title even. "And I remember your draft from years ago. There's even a line I distinctly remember commenting on, 'There is no healing where people don't believe they have the right to exist.'" I froze. That line was mine. I had written it at 2 a.m. on a bus ride home from a free clinic shift after helping an undocumented farm worker remove a piece of metal from his thigh. He didn't speak English. We had to communicate with hand gestures and eyes. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a piece of me. I scrolled down. The finalist's name, Luke Harper. I couldn't move for 10 full seconds. Then I bolted for the drawer where I kept my oldest file folder. Not the digital archive. Not the cloud. The original, creased, slightly water-stained, but real. I pulled out the essay. Clinic Without Borders, a model for equitable care among undocumented labor populations. I had shared it once. Just once. It was during my final year of undergrad. I'd stopped by the house to grab a few textbooks and a clean jacket. Luke was on the couch half watching football. He asked what I was working on, and for a rare moment he seemed genuinely curious. So I told him. I talked about my patients. About the ones who refused treatment because they feared deportation. About the nights I cried quietly in the break room because a 6-year-old had to translate her mother's medical history and still got denied meds. Luke listened, nodded, even asked questions. When I left, I said, "You can read it if you want. Just give it back." He never did. I looked up the finalist page. There it was, his headshot. Polished. Crisp white shirt, confident smile. Luke Harper, founder of Clinic Without Borders. My title, my story, my patients. Word for word. I scanned the article. The quotes were almost identical to my original phrasing. Even the anecdote about the Haitian woman with a diabetic ulcer, my patient was now his field experience. He had never set foot in that clinic. He didn't even finish college. But now he was being called a young humanitarian voice on a site read by national funders, policymakers, and top-tier universities. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt still, like a frozen lake, quiet, smooth on the surface, but one wrong step and you fall through. I printed the article, placed it side by side with my original essay. Then I opened my truth file. I added both, labeled the folder truth.nodenial.pdf. Then I closed my laptop and sat back. Because here's the part no one tells you. Sometimes it doesn't end with someone stealing your credit. Sometimes they get rewarded for it. I didn't call him, didn't text, because if I did, I knew what would happen. He'd laugh, say I was being dramatic, that he was inspired by our conversation, that family doesn't own ideas. And my parents, they'd take his side, like they always did. They'd say I was jealous, or bitter, or still hung up on old stuff. So I did the only thing I could. I kept working. I poured myself into residency. I took the hardest ER rotations, volunteered for cases no one else wanted, learned how to detect sepsis in a toddler just by the color of their lips, memorized trauma protocol until I could recite it in my sleep. I didn't talk about Luke. I didn't talk about my family, but I wrote, quietly, in the margins of my journal, in drafts of medical articles, in anonymous op-eds I submitted to smaller publications. One of them, an article about the silent trauma of immigrant patients who fear the healthcare system, was picked up by a regional medical review. It was cited, it was discussed. No photo, no fanfare, just facts, just truth. That was enough. A month later, while reviewing research summaries from a team of final-year med students, I found something that made me pause. A thank you note scribbled in the back of one paper. "Thank you, Dr. Harper. I didn't quit because of you." I didn't know who wrote it, but it felt like oxygen after weeks underwater. That night, I folded the note and slipped it into the same folder where Luke's article sat, right next to it. Because if he wanted to borrow my voice, then I would amplify my own, but my family wasn't done. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I walked into the ER lounge after a 12-hour shift and found an envelope in my locker. No name, no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from a local Texas publication. Headline: Luke Harper, named Young Community Icon of the Year. Photo: Luke, shaking hands with the mayor. My mother standing in the background, beaming like she had given birth to Gandhi. Underneath the article, in careful, familiar handwriting, my father's were 5 words. "Still better than you." I stared at the note. Then calmly I folded the paper. I walked over to the trash bin and dropped it in. Not crumpled, not ripped. Just gone. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt done, not with the fight, with needing their recognition. But sometimes the universe has a strange sense of timing, because just when I thought I had finally broken free, my phone buzzed. A hospital in San Antonio. My brother was in critical care. And guess who they call? Me. I'll tell you what happened when I walked into that ICU face to face with the family who erased me only to need me when it mattered most. The call came on a gray Thursday morning. I was finishing my post-op charting at Southview when the emergency coordination desk buzzed. "Dr. Harper, urgent consult, St. Agnes Hospital, San Antonio." Patient Luke Harper. The air seemed to warp around the words. Vitals unstable, the coordinator continued. Cardiac enzymes critical. They specifically requested your expertise. Not my parents. Not Luke. The hospital. I closed the chart I was working on. Sent a quick message to my department head, emergency consult in Texas. I'll update as needed. Then I packed my ID badge license and a hard copy of my clinical notes. I didn't pack anything personal. Not even a toothbrush. Just my white coat. My folder and the notebook I always kept in my drawer. The same one I used when I built the truth file. The flight from Chicago to San Antonio was only a few hours, but it felt like purgatory. Rain. I stared out the window most of the time, clouds melting into gray bands across the sky. I thought about what I might feel when I saw him again. Pity, anger, regret. But mostly I wondered, would he even recognize me? St. Agnes Hospital hadn't changed much since my rotations there years ago. Same antiseptic scent, same marble lobby that tried too hard to look warm. When I walked through the ICU wing, I recognized the sound before I saw anyone. Beeping monitors, air pumps, someone crying behind a curtain 3 doors down. The charge nurse met me with a clipboard. "You're Dr. Harper from Chicago," she asked, eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Yes," I nodded. "Luke Harper. I'm here for the cardiac consult." She nodded tightly. "Room 3. His condition declined overnight. Dobutamine drips holding for now, but he's not stabilizing." Her voice echoed just enough that someone behind me turned. I didn't have to guess who it was. My mother stood near the window spine, straight hands clasped tightly around a phone she wasn't even looking at. My father sat hunched in a plastic chair, staring at the floor like it owed him something. They both looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Not weaker, just dimmer. Like people trying to live in a house with no electricity. My mom turned and saw me. She blinked. "Evelyn," she said, like she wasn't sure if she should smile, cry, or apologize. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to the nurse. "Vitals chart full. Mid-list and latest ECG, please." Room 3 was dimly lit. Curtains drawn. Luke lay unconscious, IV in one arm, oxygen line under his nose. His skin a waxy pale shade I'd only ever seen on cardiac crash patients. A young intern stood beside the monitor. He looked up. "Dr. Harper." "Yes." I didn't look at Luke. I went straight to the screen. BP low, O2 fluctuating, troponin levels dangerously high. I asked for the last 3 hours of vitals. Reviewed every medication dosage. Suggested immediate adjustment to his vasopressors. All in clinical tones, sharp, efficient. The intern nodded, impressed. I moved with precision, not as a sister, as a physician. Because in that room, in that moment, Luke Harper wasn't my brother. He was a patient with failing cardiac function. I didn't let memory cloud my hands. I checked his pupils. I listened to his heart. I examined the monitors, like his last name was Smith, or Reyes, or Kim. I treated him like I would anyone else, without fear, without history, without apology. After the exam, I stepped out. My father was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall. We locked eyes. He didn't speak right away. Finally, he said, "You came." It wasn't a thank you. It was more like an observation. "I was called," I replied. He nodded once. Then silence again. Behind him, my mother watched us like she was waiting for one of us to throw the first emotional punch. She finally stepped forward. "When did you get back?" she asked, voice careful, almost hopeful. I looked her straight in the eyes. "I didn't come back. I was called to consult. That's all." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I turned to the head nurse, handed her my business card. "If there are updates, this is where to reach me. Otherwise, communicate through the attending." Then I walked out. No one followed me. The door clicked shut behind me. But this time, I wasn't the one being locked out. I was the one walking away. Later that evening, while reviewing remote ER protocols from my hotel room, my phone buzzed again. A local number. San Antonio area code. I hesitated, then picked up. "Evelyn," my mother's voice said. I closed my eyes. "Are you still near the hospital?" "Why?" "I'm at the cafe near your hotel. Just a few minutes if you're not busy." I didn't want to go, but I knew if I didn't, she'd keep calling. Or worse, show up. The cafe was quiet. A local spot with foggy windows and a little bell that chimed every time someone walked in. She was seated near the window. Same pressed charcoal sweater. Hair neatly brushed. The scent of her perfume soft, familiar, infuriating. She looked like someone preparing for a parent-teacher conference, not a mother begging a daughter for grace. I sat down, didn't take off my coat. Why did you call me Mom? She held her cup with both hands. Fingernails still painted the same soft pink. It's about Luke, she began. The doctors here are fine, but your hospital in Chicago has better equipment, a stronger team. If you could help transfer him, just say the word, I interrupted. Did it occur to you to ask me before putting my name on his medical file? She froze. Your name's not on it officially, she said quickly. I just hoped you'd consider. For the family. I stirred the tea I hadn't touched. You forged my name once. On a scholarship withdrawal. She looked down. You helped approve a visa I never authorized. Her face paled. I didn't. You used my life, my title, and my silence to make Luke look good. Her throat moved like she was trying to swallow something sharp. I stood up. If the hospital needs something official, they know how to reach me. But don't call me privately again. I walked out. Didn't look back. The cold outside felt cleaner than the air in that cafe, but the worst wasn't over. Because just when I thought my silence had finally become my boundary, they crossed one last line. They used my name again, not to erase me, but to build something fake on top of the truth I bled for. Back in Chicago, the days returned to routine, at least on the surface. I rotated through ER, wrote research memos, trained interns, and kept my voice quiet but unmissable. I thought the worst had passed, until I received an email flagged Government Request Action Required. It was from a federal database used for credential verification and sponsorship audits. They were conducting a follow-up inquiry regarding the immigration status of Camila Rosas. At first, I thought it was old paperwork resurfacing, but then I saw the PDF attached, and I stopped breathing. There it was again, my name, my signature, my license, filed 6 weeks ago. Again, and this time not just as a sponsor, but listed as medical co-director of a newly formed initiative in Texas called Clinic Without Borders. Yes, that name, my original paper, my story. And right beneath the program listing, Camila Rosas was listed as co-founder and patient liaison. What stunned me more, the listed reference contact, Barbara Harper, my mother. She had used my credentials not just to file fake visa paperwork, but to anchor an entire operation on the back of my stolen work. Not metaphorically. Legally. I sat completely still. The tea beside me had gone cold. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From fury. From something ancient and familiar being robbed of something I built with my own skin. I opened my truth file. I created a new folder and labeled it Fraud Chain Roots. Then I started assembling the original essay, the forwarded news clippings of Luke's award, the DHS notice, screenshots of the fake application metadata, Camila's visa record, my mother's outdated email reused in sponsor documents. I zipped it all, then wrote a formal complaint to the state medical board and a parallel memo to federal immigration authorities. I wasn't loud, but this time I wasn't just documenting, I was drawing a line. A week later, I got a short reply from an independent medical ethics journal where I'd anonymously published one of my essays. The subject line was just, "We think you should see this." Attached was a link to a televised interview. Luke Harper, being introduced as co-founder of a revolutionary healthcare initiative serving vulnerable communities. He sat in a crisp suit. Next to him, Camila, polished, smiling, wearing a silver lapel pin shaped like a caduceus. They talked about equity, about underserved patients, about moral courage and radical empathy. And then Luke said something that made my ears ring. My sister inspired a lot of this work. She's a physician, quiet type, doesn't like the spotlight. But I always believed in her. She made me see the gaps no one talks about. The interviewer leaned in. Is she involved with the clinic now? Luke smiled, always in spirit. I paused the video. I didn't scream. I opened a drawer, pulled out my old pair of training gloves, the first ones I used to suture in med school. They were faded, stained. The left one torn slightly at the wrist. I never used them in actual procedures, but I kept them. A reminder. That skill is earned, not borrowed, not forged, and definitely not stolen for performance art. The next morning, I spoke to a lawyer. Quietly, efficiently. I didn't plan to sue. I didn't need a courtroom battle. What I wanted was accuracy. So we filed 3 things. A cease and desist letter to the clinic's board of directors, a formal ethics violation report to the Texas Medical Oversight Committee, a federal fraud notification regarding medical impersonation. My name, once stolen, once erased, was now stamped on every official document clarifying the truth. But the Harper family had one more surprise for me. 2 weeks later, I opened my apartment mailbox and found another envelope. No return address, just heavy cream paper hand-folded. Inside a letter, slanted familiar handwriting. My father's. We raised you to be quiet. But now you've made it your mission to embarrass this family. He's your brother. Camilla is practically family. You could have had your name on something great. Instead, you chose bitterness. Still, I hope one day you'll realize you were never meant to lead, only to support. Beneath the signature was a photo. Luke and Camilla, standing next to a politician. The caption read, "Clinic Without Borders receives State Recognition Award for Excellence in Community Innovation." At the bottom, one phrase underlined in red, "Still better than you." I didn't fold the paper. I didn't burn it. I didn't cry. I pinned it to the back of my closet door, facing inward. So every morning, as I zipped up my coat, I would see it. Not as a threat, as fuel. Because when I walked on stage at the National Health Equity Conference later that year, I didn't bring that letter. I brought my name. The stage was cold. Not in temperature, though the ballroom's AC buzzed above, but in energy. That crisp kind of silence when people don't know what to expect. I stood behind the curtain, adjusting the microphone clipped to my blouse. The same white one I wore the night I stitched a man's neck artery back together at 2 a.m. That one. The screen behind me still displayed my name. Dr. Evelyn Harper, MD, Clinical Lead, Health Equity Innovation Lab. And beneath it, keynote, "The Cost of Silence in American Medicine." I took one last breath, then walked out. My heels echoed on the polished wooden floor. Some in the audience knew me, most didn't. What they did know, because of the press packet they received, was that I was the original author behind the now nationally funded Clinic Without Borders model. A model that had been mistakenly attributed elsewhere. And tonight, for the first time, I was telling the full story, but not to expose. To testify, I started not with facts, but with a story. I want to tell you about a girl I said, hands still at my sides, who loved small things, small notebooks, small wounds she could stitch shut, small gestures that meant something real. The ballroom stayed quiet. She was told she was quiet, so she believed that meant she didn't matter loud. I saw heads tilt. An older black woman in the third row nodded slowly. She believed that healing happened in the background. She didn't know the world would mistake her silence for absence. I clicked the remote in my palm. Behind me, a slide lit up, a scanned copy of my original Borderless Clinics proposal, dated 4 years earlier, stamped with my student ID, unmistakably mine. Then I showed a side-by-side image of the Clinic Without Borders marketing deck. Same structure, same mission, same language, but different name on the cover. I turned back to the crowd. "I don't need revenge," I said. "I need record." After the presentation during the panel Q&A, someone finally asked what everyone was thinking. "Why didn't you go public earlier or sue?" I leaned toward the mic. Because every second I spent chasing justice was a second stolen from doing the actual work. And I've done enough of that. Murmurs rippled across the room. I continued, "Sometimes justice isn't a courtroom. It's standing in a room full of people who see you, finally see you, and don't need you to bleed to believe." As I stepped off stage, a young resident, barely 23, ran up to me. Her name tag read Naya OB-GYN Track. She clutched her program notes. That she stammered. That was the first time I saw someone say it out loud. That being invisible is a cost, not a choice. She paused, then pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I kept this quote from a textbook you co-edited. I memorized it. It got me through exams." She unfolded it. It read, "We serve not because we are saviors. We serve because no one served us. EH." I smiled and pressed her hand. That moment right there was worth every seasoning they ever tried to steal. I thought that was the end. But a week later, I got a call from a small nonprofit in Arizona. They'd just been awarded a grant to build a mobile clinic for undocumented families living in the desert zones. They asked if I'd consider joining as an advisor. They said, "You're not flashy," the coordinator told me over the phone, "but your work saves lives quietly." I said yes. I didn't need my name on a building, but I'd make damn sure truth was in the foundation. I never replied to my father's last letter, but I didn't need to, because one morning, months later, I got a Google alert for Clinic Without Borders. It had been suspended, pending federal investigation. Fraud, licensing inconsistencies, improper sponsorship documents. Camilla's name was removed. Luke had gone silent on social media, and an old medical board record with my name long buried was now being recirculated in academic newsletters. The truth file had reached them. Quiet, but relentless. At home, I sat by the window sipping cinnamon tea, the one flavor I still allowed myself from childhood. Next to me was a printed copy of the official ethics board statement. They had recognized my authorship. They had restored the credit, not with fireworks, with a line at the bottom. We amend our previous records to acknowledge Dr. Evelyn Harper's original contribution dated March 12, 2021. Just that. It was enough. People always ask me if I forgave them. My parents, Luke, Camilla. I don't answer, not because I'm bitter, but because forgiveness is not the ending of my story. Freedom is. So if you're listening right now, wherever you are, maybe you've been erased, or overshadowed, or told you were too soft, too quiet, too ordinary. Let me say this clearly. You are not invisible. They saw you. That's why they tried to silence you. Your existence is your resistance. And me, I'm still here, still writing, still walking into rooms that never expected me. And every time I do, I leave behind a copy of the truth file, not as proof, but as a mirror. So the next quiet one walks in and knows exactly who she is. And if this reminded you of anyone yourself, your sister, your friend, don't scroll past. Comment her name. Let her know we saw her. And we're not done yet, not even close. Story 2. My fiancé sent me a chilly SMS. The wedding is off. As you like, I calmly answered, expect a call from my lawyer. After that, I discreetly removed my name from our mortgage application for the opulent condo she had demanded. Her lawyer called furiously within 48 hours. My customer stumbled because he was unaware of the financial ramifications. She demanded that I clean up this mess right away when she arrived at my home that evening, carrying fancy luggage. Hello everyone, I need your assistance before we begin today's video. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello, longtime lurker on Reddit. Since some participants may be familiar with my primary account, the first-time poster was thrown away for obvious reasons. Hold on tight, because this is going to be a lengthy one. After seeing a similar post on the first page yesterday, I decided it could be cathartic to get this off my chest after months of considering whether or not to share my tale. Additionally, it could assist someone else in identifying the warning signs that I overlooked. A fair caution. I suppose I should give some history first, because this is going to be a crazy roller coaster from beginning to end. As a 31-year-old man, I am employed at an aerospace business in Seattle as a mechanical engineer. A quite ordinary man. A little too heavy. I'm working on it. I'm coming to grips with my receding hairline, and undoubtedly more at ease discussing tensile strength than fads. I came from a middle-class family in Michigan, worked part-time jobs, and received scholarships to attend college, and immediately after graduation, I got a good job. Then I got to know Jessica. In terms of appearance, she was totally out of my league, a 28-year-old marketing executive at a prominent company. 3 years ago, we met at my buddy Kyle's birthday celebration. I still don't know why she gave me her number that evening, but she was his coworker's +1. She is one of those women who appear to have been taken straight out of a magazine. We clicked, even though I don't often go for men like myself. Or I believed that we did. The first year was fantastic. She appeared really interested in my job and was pleasant and adventurous, despite the fact that discussing aeronautical engineering during dinner isn't really interesting. She would write me encouraging messages during important presentations, inquire about my projects, and occasionally even wear this weird NASA t-shirt I got her to bed. In hindsight, there were warning signs from the start. However, love is blind, isn't it? She would say these few things about my potential, how networking would help me become a senior engineer, or how dressing better for customer meetings would draw management's attention. I believed her to be supportive at the time. After a year, I can see that she was attempting to shape me into someone I wasn't. Things began to shift. Her recommendations turned into critiques. An accomplished professional suddenly found my apartment too tiny. It was awkward to have my fully working Honda next to her BMW. My companion's lack of ambition was preventing me from moving forward. Because he was too blue-collar for her group, my brother Alex, who has been my best friend since I was a youngster and works in construction, was progressively cut out of our social gatherings. However, I began to change because I was in love. I purchased better clothing. I smiled at her boss's ridiculous jokes while attending her ostentatious business parties. I spent less time with my brother. She insisted that we should remain in Seattle, close to her family and social network, so I even declined a promotion offer in Chicago. After 2 years, she sobbed and accepted my proposal, then got to work organizing a wedding that would have cost more than my yearly salary. Investing in our social capital is key. Whenever I brought up the budget, she would say that these relationships would benefit us both. I therefore started setting aside portions of my bonuses and overtime pay in a special savings account. In the end, I had $22,500 saved just for wedding deposits. Jessica claimed to be saving for our future in different ways, but she never made a single contribution. Because, well, I was a fool, I didn't question it. She began putting a lot of pressure on us to purchase a home 6 months prior to the wedding. Not just any house. She resided with all of her business associates in a $785,000 home in Bellevue's most exclusive neighborhood. "If we want to be taken seriously, Mike, we need to have a place in this neighborhood," she said. I totally ignored the fact that the mortgage payments would put a strain on my finances. However, I concurred once more. Love dumbs you down. My credit score was higher. Therefore, I was the lead borrower on the preliminary mortgage forms that we signed. She had previously made many Pinterest boards for every area and was organizing improvements. She had even promised her parents that when they came from Portland, they would have a special guest bedroom with a separate bathroom. Everything was in place. The wedding was 4 months away. The house closing was planned for a month after that. Despite my financial worries, I thought we would find a way to make it work. One evening, I sat down with a spreadsheet and tried to figure out how I was going to pay for the wedding and the house and still have money left over for needs. There was a problem with the math. Jessica insisted on keeping our funds apart until after the wedding, even though our combined income should have been plenty. She would argue it's simply cleaner that way. However, all of the significant costs were somehow ending up on my side of the ledger. I made an effort to have a meaningful discussion about money that evening. I gave her my spreadsheet, told her about my worries, and said we might want to consider a less expensive area. She regarded me as though I had proposed that we live in a cardboard box. "Do you want us to succeed or not, Mike? There is more to this area than just a home. It's about opportunities, relationships, and surrounding ourselves with individuals who will help us advance our professions. We can't afford it, though," I demanded. "Not unless you intend to make a sizable mortgage contribution." She let out a loud sigh. As I previously mentioned, I am in charge of organizing the honeymoon and wedding vendors. In addition, I'll be eligible for a significant promotion that will quadruple my pay when we get married. Until then, all we have to do is project the proper picture. I had never heard of such promotion before, but it gave me hope. Perhaps she was correct. Perhaps this temporary financial hardship might eventually pay off. I decided to proceed with the house designs, despite the knot in my gut. Since our furniture evidently wasn't suitable for the new location, we spent the next weekends traveling to open homes, consulting with interior designers, and attending dinner parties with her neighborhood acquaintances. I started to feel out of place. Jessica, though, appeared to love it all. As though I were a status symbol rather than a real person, she had presented me as my fiancé, the aerospace engineer. Then came the text that made all the difference. I can pinpoint the precise moment when my entire existence was turned upside down. To get through a major project deadline, I was waiting in line at QFC with a basket full of weird, crappy pizza rolls, upscale perfumed trash bags, and energy drinks. When my phone buzzed, Jessica's name appeared. At first, I didn't give it much thought. I assumed it had to do with dinner plans or the controversy surrounding the wedding venue that had been taking up much of our chats lately. Rather, I received 8 words that were like a kick to the stomach. "The wedding is off. My lawyer will call you." That was it. No feeling, no justification. Not even punctuation correctly, with the exception of the final cold spell. as if I were only a commercial transaction that she deemed unworthy of her attention. Like a fool, I just stood there paralyzed. It was my time, but the clerk had to remind me again. I recall paying for my belongings automatically. Before I could even get myself to enter my apartment, I sat in the parking lot for almost 15 minutes after driving home in total stillness. The most peculiar aspect, I was not shouting or sobbing. I simply kept quiet. "As you wish" was the only thing I sent back. She most likely didn't even understand the Princess Bride illusion. But I understood the true meaning of the passage. It went beyond simply calling off our wedding. She said, "Don't get in touch with me. Everything will be handled by my lawyer." She believed she had all the cards as I was being thrown out like yesterday's trash, but she overlooked something really crucial. Something occurred to me as I sat on my couch and gazed at her text message. We recently began creating the joint accounts, the mortgage, and the wedding money. Everything was still being worked on. Nothing was decided. So before I even removed my coat, I made up my mind. I pulled out my laptop, went to the Chase Bank mortgage interface, and logged in. It took just 3 clicks to complete my application. Her vision of the ideal Bellevue mansion vanished in an instant. Most likely, people believe that to be trivial. Perhaps it was. But after all the sacrifices I had made, I had to gradually erase myself for 3 years in order to become what she desired. This was more than petty behavior. I wanted to preserve some of my dignity in this situation. I still wasn't ready for what came next, though. The hours that followed were bizarre. I kept anticipating Jessica to bombard my phone with messages and calls for an explanation. However, nothing was present. In some ways, the quiet was worse than any encounter involving anger. What I was beginning to think was verified. I was disposable now that I had fulfilled my purpose. That night, I hardly slept at all. My thoughts continued to race, reliving every instance of our connection in an effort to find any hints I could have overlooked. Did I say something, or did I do something? Was this something she had planned all along? With no answers in sight, the questions continued to accumulate. Despite feeling like a zombie, I made myself go to work the following morning. After glancing at me, my team lead inquired as to my health. After hesitating, I just said, "The wedding was called off by Jessica." I nearly cried when I saw the compassion in his eyes. Silently, he whispered, "Take the week off. When you return, this project will still be under progress." With an appreciative nod, I left for home, grabbing some comfort food at the grocery store. I saw it at that moment, a bridal magazine with a model wearing the dress Jessica had selected on the cover. I felt a strange disconnection as I stood in the checkout line and stared at it. I was supposed to marry this woman today, and that was only yesterday. She was an unknown individual who had ruined my life through text messages. I returned to my apartment and began to collect Jessica's belongings. Her toiletries, a few books, and the clothes she kept at my house. Considering that we had been dating for 3 years, it wasn't much. At that moment, I realized how little she had truly put into our relationship. She wasn't even very present in my house. She insisted on us spending time at her place because it was more pleasant. I had overlooked another warning sign. I carefully labeled Jessica's belongings, packed everything in boxes, and placed it by the door. After that, I took action that I had been putting off for months. I gave my brother Alex a call. We had a brief but therapeutic conversation. "I told you so" was not what he said, despite the fact that he had never trusted Jessica completely. "I'm coming over and I'm bringing pizza," he said, catching up with my brother that evening. I experienced a peculiar mixture of relief and destruction. The destruction was clear. Just now, my future had fallen apart. It felt like I had been holding my breath for 3 years, though, since it took longer to comprehend the relief. I was bending to meet Jessica's specifications. Finally, I was able to let out a breath. Less than 48 hours following the SMS message. My phone calls when I'm eating the same pizza rolls I purchased at the shop while lounging on my couch. Unknown figure. Since I'm not under that much stress at the moment, I let it go to voicemail. This notice shows up a minute later. "Hello, this is Rebecca Goldstein, attorney for Miss Jessica Chambers. We urgently request a call back regarding your mortgage withdrawal, as this action may constitute breach of contract or financial interference. Please contact us immediately." I almost laughed at the urgently request part. Suddenly, her lawyer wasn't so cold and clinical anymore. Funny how it works when you strike them in the wallet. I didn't call back. Instead, I simply waited. And sure enough, more calls followed. Emails to everybody, with growing urgency. They weren't expecting me to fight back. Jessica, in her normal manner, must have expected I'd be absolutely destroyed, maybe even begging her to reconsider. But I wasn't. I had just finished. Kyle, a buddy of ours, called me the next day. He sounded really uncomfortable. "Hey dude, did you actually leave the house?" "Deal?" "Yes." Because Jessica is panicking out, I said, "Okay." She reportedly instructed all of her coworkers to start shopping for homes in the same neighborhood and had already bought around $18,000 worth of bespoke furnishings. I nearly replied, "Not my fucking problem," but I refrained. Although, to be honest, I may have came off as nasty, I didn't want to. She continued, "You're being vindictive that you're doing this to punish her." When Kyle paused, "She even had the audacity to inform everyone in the office yesterday that you were mistreating her financially by canceling the mortgage." I laughed out at it. Abusing her money, the woman who didn't spend a dime on our future wedding or house. After 3 years together, the woman just attempted to text me to break up with me. Kyle, she is free to say anything she likes. If someone texts me to break up with me, I won't buy a property with them. After a lengthy silence, Kyle said something that truly struck a chord with me. "Yes, that's reasonable. Just so you know, though, she has been giving various explanations for why you two split up. She is claiming that it was reciprocal to certain persons. She is implying to others that there were issues she was unable to discuss. Man, it's strange." I sat there contemplating the issues she was implying after we hung up. What did she mean to say? That I was violent? Unfaithful? I could tell she was in damage control mode because she was telling various tales to different individuals. However, why regulate damage? If she made this choice, the numbers didn't add up. The days that followed were a peculiar combination of sudden epiphanies and emotional apathy. I was recalling talks with Jessica that, although innocent at the time, now had a sinister gleam to them. For example, when she would reacted with barely disguised disappointment, or when she casually said that her ex had been generous with her money and that she had anticipated more from him whenever I brought up retirement savings rather than spending money on luxuries. I began searching through previous images of us together from different occasions on my phone. In practically every shot, it was like staring at strangers. Jessica had the ideal position and was conscious of the camera, but I appeared a little awkward, as if I were making too much of an effort to blend in with her environment. What had caused me to lose touch with myself? The harsh realities of finances also hammered home. I totaled the money I had spent on our relationship over the previous 3 years by looking at my bank accounts. The sum was astounding. She had pushed that we take excursions that cost us close to $65,000, restaurants where the bill always ended up in front of me for no apparent reason, presents for her professional achievements, and of course, the wedding cash. Her contributions, meanwhile, had been small, occasionally preparing a wonderful meal or purchasing birthday gifts for me that were far from matching the money I had spent. But it wasn't just about the cash. The unbalanced take with minimal give was the main focus. I hadn't realized how one-sided our relationship had become because I had been so consumed by what I believed to be love. A week following the text of the breakup, at last I made myself cancel the wedding suppliers. Explaining that the wedding was off without going into specifics made each call agonizing in its own way. Although I lost some deposits, most were understanding. Our cake would be made by one vendor, a tiny family-run bakery. It stung especially. The owner sounded really unhappy, even though she had been really enthused about our design. "When you two entered for the tasting, it seemed like you were in love." Softly, she said. All I could say was that I believed we were. For the first time since the text, I poured myself a cup of coffee, canceled the final vendor, and sat on my balcony to watch the rain in Seattle. Tears were streaming down my face. For the future, not for Jessica. I lost the person I had tortured myself into being, and I believed I had the life I had planned. But something else was bubbling behind the sadness. A silent resolve, an understanding that I had been given the opportunity to take back my identity, before I made what would have been the most significant error of my life. Perhaps this was a gift as difficult as it was. At that moment, a second alert appeared on my phone, an email from the mortgage broker verifying that my application had been withdrawn. It said in the subject line, "The application has ended. Options for the future are accessible." It was strangely prescient, what Jessica was unaware of. No one was aware that in the weeks before, to her communication, I had begun to notice strange things. There were traces of her job, including late-night emails in which she would conceal her screen for mysterious client meals that appeared to be unusually late. When I entered the room, she would instantly lock her phone. I hadn't seen everything. I simply didn't want to accept the possible meaning. But now that everything was falling apart, I felt as though I could see properly for the first time. I chose to remain silent rather than respond to her lawyer, or attempt to save anything. Give them a panic. Let them speculate as to my next course of action. The truth began to seep to the surface during that period of stillness. Around 8 p.m., 3 days after the text, someone knocked on my apartment door. I had no expectations. It was Mr. Chambers, her father. He delivered this heartfelt speech about how happy he was to have me join their family over dinner a month prior, which was the last time I saw him. He just seems worn out and ashamed now. He blurted out what was happening in the home without even saying hello, saying, "I'm not buying a house with someone who texts me to say we're done and sends her lawyer to speak to me." I crossed my arms. "Are you present on her behalf?" He glanced down. "No, she won't tell us the truth, which is why I'm here. She says the wedding is off 1 minute. She then yells about furnishings credit pulls and invoices threatening to be disgraced in front of her Apex marketing colleagues." I briefly thought about telling him everything, all of my concerns, and the warning signs I had been ignoring. However, I didn't. I just stated that she terminated it. I appreciated that for the first time in her life, she was able to deal with the fallout from her acts. After giving a slow nod, he said something along the lines of, "I told her not to do this," and turned to go. As I watched him go, an odd serenity descended upon me. The real bombshell, however, was on the horizon. I received a call from my brother Alex the next morning. Growing up, we were always close, but over the previous year, Jessica's remarks about Dad being too blue-collar and out of step with our new social group have effectively strained our relationship. It had been over a month since we last spoke. He seemed uncertain as he said, "Hey, bro." Kyle told me what had transpired with Jessica. "Listen, I should have probably told you this months ago, but I have something to tell you now." My heart began to race. "What is it?" A lengthy pause ensued. "Do you recall that remodeling project I was working on at that upscale apartment building downtown? The location of Cascade Heights?" Yes, I did see Jessica there with a man. They appeared quite comfortable as they entered his flat together. I was at a loss for what to think. The manner they were touching each other may have been a work-related incident, but I wasn't sure if I should inform you, so I snapped a quick photo. I didn't want to ruin everything if I was mistaken. While we were still on the phone, he texted me the photo. It was unmistakably Jessica, in a dress I had never seen, with a tall, well-groomed man wearing a fancy suit. There was something more than friendly about the way his hand was on the small of her back. It was from 2 months ago, according to the timestamp. Ryan is the man's name. Said, "Alex?" I spoke with a few of the building's maintenance staff. He is a very successful investment banker, drives an Aston Martin real jerk who boasts about his collection of watches. Ryan. Immediately, the name clicked. She had brought him up a few times, but only as a client of her marketing company. Claimed that he was significant, yet challenging. He must have been significant. Okay. We hung up, and I immediately started looking into it. When I accessed her Instagram, the majority of her postings were abruptly hidden. First red flag. However, her tagged photographs were still visible to me. 3 weeks ago, on the same weekend, there was one from a charity gala. She says she was visiting a spa for a girl's getaway. Ryan, this guy, was in the picture instead of her. Additionally, her arm and a portion of her garment were visible in the corner. It was the same outfit in Alex's photo. I continued to dig, looked in the recently erased folder for our shared cloud photo account that we had created for wedding preparation. I discovered a number of her selfies that I had never seen before, obviously taken at someone else's place. Elegant space with windows from floor to ceiling and a view of the Space Needle. A hotshot banker would have a home like that? Things were beginning to come together. The frequent comparisons to her friends, husbands who were truly making a name for themselves, the abrupt comments about my pay, and the mounting push to relocate to a pricey area that was beyond our means. The remarks that I ought to network more and look better. She wasn't only being unfaithful, she was improving. Additionally, I was the unnecessary stepping stone. I needed a day to comprehend everything to let the hurt and rage run their course. Then I took a step that I hadn't taken in almost a year. I contacted Trevor, a friend from college, who had been offering me a position at his engineering business in Denver, but I had declined since Jessica demanded that we establish a presence in Seattle. "Hello, unknown person." When he picked up, he said, "I owe the pleasure to what? How is that offer of a job going?" I inquired. A pause occurred. Then he chuckled. "At last, you quit your job as a princess. Still available guy. $125,000 plus moving costs. When are you able to begin?" I grinned for the first time in days. "What do you think about next month?" In a rough sea, the chat with Trevor was like a life raft. He launched into excited explanations of the projects I'd be working on, the team I'd be joining, and the amazing hiking trails just an hour from Denver instead of pressing for information about the split. It was just what I need. An idea of a future unrelated to Jessica or the life I had been attempting to create with her. For the first time in days, I felt energetic when we hung up. I took out my notepad and began to make lists. Things I had to do in order to get out of Seattle. Things to pack or people to get in touch with. It was satisfying to be taking action and to have a solid strategy that was wholly original with me. I gave myself permission to reflect deeply on the ramifications of what I had learned that evening. Jessica wasn't only unfaithful. While she was pressuring me to make a financial commitment that would have crippled me if she had gotten her way, she had been meticulously creating a backup plan which she believed to be a superior choice. What stung most was that it was calculated. I couldn't help but wonder whether she had been seeing this Ryan man for a long time before accepting my proposal. Until something better arrived, our engagement had been a farce and a handy arrangement. I felt sick to my stomach from the inquiries. I couldn't sleep that night. Rather, I ended up seeking for hints by going over our text history. There they were all over the place. Harmless-seeming communications. Her Instagram post included references to late meetings at events I wasn't invited to, which happened to overlap with dates. Last-minute cancellations of our plans due to work-related crises and a growing number of grievances over my financial decisions, lifestyle choices, and even hobbies. I was tired by morning, yet I was still able to think well. In order to provide notice of my flat, I composed an official email to my landlord. I used the internet to apply for a driver's license in Colorado. Even though Jessica didn't like it, I emailed the few friends I still had, notifying them about my impending move. Every move I made toward regaining my freedom was one step closer to the disaster she had left me in. However, Jessica's presence continued to hover like a ghost even as I was making progress. Her lawyer insisted that I had moral and legal responsibilities with relation to the property acquisition, in a second more demanding email than the first. Without answering her father's remarks, I sent it to a friend who is a lawyer. This kept repeating in my head. I told her not to do this. How had she broken things off, and what had he specifically cautioned her against? I had a sneaking suspicion that Jessica's romance with Ryan wasn't the only secret that would soon surface, and it was becoming evident that her carefully cultivated facade was starting to crumble under strain. My bank contacted the next morning, just when I thought things couldn't get much more dramatic. Not a message that was generated automatically, a real expert in preventing fraud. At 11:37 p.m., it appears that someone attempted to take out the full $22,500 from our shared wedding savings account. The night before, because the transaction attempted to move all of the money to a secret checking account that was only in Jessica's name, it was marked as suspicious. I was still on the phone with the bank representative when my email pinged with a fresh message subject line, urgent about wedding finances, so I quickly slapped a freeze on the account and requested details of any previous access attempts. It came from Jessica's attorney, Rebecca Goldstein. My client is worried about the money in the joint savings account for your now canceled wedding, Mr. Thompson. She paid many merchants directly and made multiple deposits into this account. She thinks she has a right to get a sizable amount back. Incredulous, I gazed at the email. This whole thing was a lie. Every bank statement and deposit record, I had proved that all of the money originated in my account. Jessica had made no contribution at all. She had always kept her finances apart, arguing that it was more prudent for her to pay for some things alone. She was now attempting to pilfer my money and claim a portion of it as her own. Trevor had a brother-in-law who worked in family law, so I forwarded the email to him. He answered right away. Keep everything safe. Every text, every email. Hire a lawyer. Yesterday. So I did. I spoke with Sherry Levin, who is said to be the most tenacious family law lawyer in Seattle that afternoon. Her $5,000 retainer wasn't cheap. But the instant I described my predicament and showed her the facts I'd acquired, she took the case. Mr. Thompson, she added with a smile that reminded me of a shark. Given the situation, you've been remarkably restrained, but it's time to defend yourself. It is obvious that Miss Chambers is trying to commit fraud. That same day, she sent Jessica's attorney a formal cease and desist letter that included screenshots of the attempted illegal withdrawal, and all the bank documents demonstrating the money was mine alone. She also suggested that I stop communicating with Jessica altogether and let the legal process handle things. My phone was overflowing with notifications that evening. Jessica had made 8 consecutive attempts to call me. She began texting when I didn't respond. It's unbelievable that you have a lawyer. We must have an adult conversation about this. You're acting illogically. Has the account been frozen? For the cancellation costs, I need that money. None of it got a response from me. Instead, I sent everything to Sherry and blocked Jessica's number. The next morning, Kyle called again. He sounded anxious. Dude. Jessica came into the office today completely upset. She was telling everybody who would listen that you're attempting to bankrupt her, that you're withholding her money for the wedding vendors who are threatening to suit her. That's strange, I said calmly, since I have documents indicating I paid for everything and she contributed nothing. Yeah, well, there's more. Kyle continued, his voice falling. She's also telling others you were controlling, and that's why she had to stop things quickly, that you supervised her expenditures and separated her from friends. My blood ran cold. Although she was the one who had dominated every part of our relationship, chastised my friends, and alienated my family. She was attempting to portray me as the abuser. You've known me for years, Kyle. Do you think so? Obviously not. He spoke hastily. But I know you better than anyone at work. Additionally, Jessica is capable of being persuasive when she so chooses. I sent Sherry this new information after we hung up. She responded right away. This modifies our strategy. We must address these unfounded allegations before they become more widespread and obtain witness accounts of her behavior from friends and relatives. A haze of legal preparations characterized the following 48 hours. Sherry asked me to compile friend testimonies on Jessica's domineering conduct. In a sworn declaration, my brother admitted to seeing her with Ryan. I created a comprehensive history of our relationship that included all of the warning signs I could recall in retrospect, as well as the critiques, isolation strategies, and financial manipulations. Jessica's attorney sent another email during this time. The tone was very different this time. The escalation of what my client considered to be a private problem has upset her. If you agree to help with the house problem, she is prepared to give up any claim to the joint account. Translation: Jessica was attempting to use the money as leverage for the house after realizing she had been caught in a lie about it. The simplicity of Sherry's response was exquisite. Documentation of Miss Chambers' effort to scam him is in the possession of my client. Her unlawful attempt to obtain money that was clearly his alone, followed by her disparaging his reputation in front of common acquaintances. If required, we are ready to take this issue all the way to the end of the judicial system. Regarding the property, which was never bought, and any money that is exclusively my client's, there will be no discussion. Things really took off at that point. That night, I packed up even more of my possessions, going through years' worth of material to choose what was worth bringing to Denver. Examining each item and determining if it actually added value to my life, or if I had only purchased it to appease Jessica, was a strangely soothing exercise. The cost of the items she had demanded I bring to client meetings. The pompous art books that I had never read were being sold. My prized collection of science fiction books, which Jessica had consigned to a cupboard due to their immature nature, was in a donation pile, absolutely accompanying me to Denver. My phone was vibrating with texts from unidentified callers while I worked. I believed that Jessica's friends were attempting to coerce me into answering. I paid them all no attention. Sherry had made it plain. Around midnight, no communication other than through authorized means. I was worn out, but pleased with my progress. Before going to bed, I took one more look at my email. The subject line of the mail was from an address I didn't recognize. You ought to be aware of Jessica's reality. I moved my finger over the delete button. Curiosity prevailed, even if it may have been just another manipulation technique. A lady called Megan sent the email claiming to have been Jessica's former coworker at her prior employer. Megan claims that Jessica had a history of clinging to wealthy men, using them to boost her social status or profession, and then letting them go when a better opportunity presented itself. Megan said that she had done the same to her last partner, a doctor who had paid for her apartment improvements and a car. She sought an excuse to end the relationship when he proposed. She started dating her employer 2 weeks later. Uncertain of how to interpret this information, I gazed at the screen. Was it someone with a vendetta, or was it real? Without remark, I sent it to Sherry and eventually went to bed. A startling occurrence occurred the next morning as my imagination raced with potential outcomes. Jessica's attorney, Rebecca Goldstein, left Sherry a message requesting that they talk about a possible solution. The tone was significantly different from her earlier correspondence. It was more accommodative and less demanding. Something had changed. I quickly gave Sherry a call to deliver the message. She said, "Interesting timing. I was going to give you a call. After researching Miss Chambers last night, it appears that your predicament is not unusual. If this goes to court, a trend here may be extremely important." Megan's email. That was part of what I requested, but there's more. To put it mildly, your ex-fiancé has a long history of financial problems. Miss Goldstein and I are supposed to speak over the phone this afternoon. How is the packing progressing in the interim? Her gentle admonition to keep going with my plans, regardless of how the legal drama unfolds, made me grin. "Denver is feeling really good," Sherry stated confidently. "Mr. Thompson living well is the finest kind of retaliation. Keep it in mind." My doorbell rang as I hung up the phone. Another unannounced guest. There was no indication that this roller coaster would slow down. Around 10 o'clock that evening, I got a Facebook message from an unfamiliar account. No profile photo, only a name. Mitchell Ryan. "Let's have a conversation. Whatever game she's playing, I don't want to play it." As I answered, my hands were trembling. "Discuss what?" quickly he responded about Jessica and the falsehoods she has been telling us both. The next morning, we decided to meet at a coffee shop downtown. I came early in part to explore the area, and in part to see if this was a trap of any sort. But the man from the picture arrived just in time. Tall, well-groomed, with a pricey watch gleaming on his wrist. Bro classic finance. When he saw me, he came up and held out his hand. "I'm Ryan Mike." After getting our coffees, we located a peaceful spot. We awkwardly assessed one another for a minute. Then he said something. "First, I must know something. You and Jessica broke up exactly when she texted me 4 days ago to let me know that the wedding was off." He seems truly taken aback. Because her family had already invested in the house, she informed me that you two broke up months ago and that you were just completing the purchase out of remorse. That old knot in my gut started to grow. That is untrue. Up until the day she sent that text, we were engaged. June was the planned month for the wedding. Ryan looked truly upset as he combed through his hair. "Jesus! It's been over 3 months since we first met. She informed me that her ex was needy and refused to let go. She was unable to post about us on social media at this time because of this. 3 months. I repeated, mentally calculating the whole cost of our house hunting time. Included the cake tasting we had done together, as well as the final location choices. There's more. Ryan said, his expression uneasy. She informed me that you were controlling your problems, sometimes even physically frightening. She had to end things softly because of this. It seemed as if someone had hit me. That isn't accurate at all. She was never touched by me. I didn't even raise my voice. Anyone who knows me will tell you. Ryan gave a slow nod. I think you're real. Lately, things haven't been adding up. She informed me last week that she required $15,000 in order to pursue an investment possibility. The moment I paused, I became quite angry. Then yesterday, she called and sobbed about how her vindictive ex was attempting to destroy her career and finances. He laughed without amusement. That's probably you. After she attempted to drain our joint account and then made false claims that she was involved, my lawyer wrote a stop and desist. I clarified that we spent about 2 hours analyzing timing stories and falsehoods she gave us all. The resulting image was worse than I had anticipated. Jessica wasn't only unfaithful, she had been leading a totally double life, taking advantage of us both to make money. She claimed that I was harsh in order to justify her occasional unavailability when we were together. When she was with him, she informed me she was at work functions. In addition to asking him to engage in her business ventures, she had been pressuring me to purchase a home that I couldn't afford. Ryan paused just before we left. You should be aware of another issue. She began mentioning her pregnancy last month. My blood froze. Are you expecting? Yes. However, she changed her mind when I began to probe her about doctor's visits and schedules. Claimed that it was too soon to be certain. It struck me as odd. I thanked him for being honest and for meeting me. We got up to go. He uttered something that would always stick in my memory while looking me in the eye. Man, we both escaped a gunshot. However, it was you who dared to call her bluff. Equipped with this fresh knowledge, I reconvened with Sherry. She suggested that I write down everything I discussed with Ryan, but especially the serious false abuse accusations. We've got enough to sue for defamation, she said. Let's first observe their reaction to our initial stance, though. There wasn't much waiting for me. I got another call from Kyle that night. He sounded terrified. The most bizarre thing just occurred at work, dude. While we were in a meeting, Jessica received a call and hurried out, appearing to have seen a ghost. She returned after 20 minutes, packed up her desk, and departed. According to her boss, she will be taking a personal leave of absence with immediate effect. What did you do? I informed him that I had met Ryan. About contrasting her lies notes. Kyle fell silent in shock. God damn, so the guy actually contacted you? That is, wow. There's more, I said, and explained about the pregnancy claims, the abuse allegations. All of it. Damn, Kyle whispered. I knew she could be manipulative, but this is next level. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mike, it's Rebecca Goldstein, Jessica's attorney. I need to speak with you directly. I immediately replied that all communication should go through my lawyer, but she cut me off. I'm no longer representing Miss Chambers. I resigned from her case this morning after discovering my client provided materially false information. I cannot and will not be party to fraud or defamation. I was speechless. Her own lawyer had dropped her. Later that day, I received an email from Jessica's work address, the subject line simply read, please. Against Sherry's advice, I opened it. Mike, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I'm seeing a therapist now and taking medication for my issues. I never meant for things to go this far. Ryan told me you two met. I know how it looks, but it wasn't like that. I was confused and scared about our future. Please don't file any lawsuits. My parents are devastated. My job is on the line. I'll do anything to make this right. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded it to Sherry with the note. I think she's finally realizing actions have consequences. The final communication came a week later, not from Jessica, but from her father. He asked if we could meet at a small park near my apartment. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Mr. Chambers looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by a worried father with dark circles under his eyes. Mike, he began, his voice rough. I owe you an apology. A big one, Jessica. She's not well. She's been diagnosed with some serious issues. That's not an excuse for what she did to you, but I want you to know that the person you thought you knew, in many ways, she wasn't real. He explained that Jessica had been struggling with mental health issues since college, but had always refused treatment. The perfect image she projected was a facade that required increasing effort to maintain. We've convinced her to enter a residential treatment program, he said. It's the only way forward. But before she left, she asked me to give you this. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $22,500. The exact amount of the wedding fund, along with a handwritten note that simply said, "I'm sorry for the pain I caused. You deserved better." We parted with an awkward handshake that turned into a brief hug. As he walked away, he turned back once. "By the way, congratulations on the job in Denver. Fresh start. Sounds like exactly what you need."